Hello all, John Adkison here again, doing another interview for the the Circumcision Harms, circumcision in quotes, docu-series. And today is a little special. It's not that the other interviews aren't special, each and every one of them have been special and unique each and every time. It's been great. But the reason why this one is different is because I am sitting here in the same room with my lovely wife. Jennifer, please introduce yourself.
I am Jennifer Adkison. I am John's wife, and we have 2 intact sons together.
So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in intactivism or advocacy work for genital autonomy.
So it all started when I was pregnant with our first, who at the time we did not know if we were having a boy or a girl. And I was with an OB, and he asked me at one of my prenatal visits if we were going to circumcise. And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? And he didn't really acknowledge yes or no. He just checked a box and moved on to a next question. And I'm like, I just left kind of like, okay, that's what you're supposed to do, I guess. And then a couple months later, for different reasons, I switched care to a midwife. And I'm very thankful that I did for numerous reasons, but one of them because when she asked the question at our free consultation, which was supposed to be 15 minutes but lasted 45 minutes, so shout out to midwives, they are amazing, they take time to get to know their patients. She asked if we were going to circumcise. I'm like, yeah, I think so. And she's like, here, read this. And she had me a packet of info, and in it was a Mothering magazine article written by Paul Fleece. And I took it home and read it, and I didn't even get halfway through the article and I was in tears, and I stopped and I handed it to John and I'm like, we can't do this. And he's like, okay, whatever, whatever you want. I'm like, no, you need to read this because you need to know why we're not doing this. And so he read it and he agreed with me, and we didn't really have much discussion after that, and went back and reported back to my midwife, thank you for that information. We're definitely not going to circumcise. And it turned out we had a boy. And then 16 months and 2 days later, we had our second son, and also intact. And by that time, it was, old hat. We already knew what we were doing, and it was never a question of should we or shouldn't we. So that is what got me into intactivism.
So that was our own sons, and we learned to keep our sons intact, but you actually started being an active advocate.
So, as happens with many people who learn about the horrors of circumcision, I could not stop reading about it. I started researching extensively. I talked with my good friend who was becoming a pastor at the time. We had met in college and stayed in touch with him. Matter of fact, he and his wife are our son's godparents. And he was also like, I'm Christian. And he's like, yeah, there's no Christian reason to circumcise. Like, Paul talks against it in the New Testament. And so I read more about it. I studied more about it. And it was really when everyone kind of made the transition over from MySpace to Facebook is when I really started getting into intactivism online. And Kat Nornberg, who is a in-person friend of mine, on Facebook connected me with Brother Kay and some of the other popular intactivists and encouraged me to come to some of the protests, which at the time I didn't. I was really hesitant. But later on, I have gone to a couple protests, and I have learned that I prefer your whole baby tabling events better over protests, because for me, it's more gentle education. It's not in your face, and I prefer, for myself personally, the more gentle education type of activism.
So for those of you that don't already know us, our oldest is now 15 years old, and in a matter of months he's going to be 16. So it's been a while since we've been on this journey.
Yeah, so I think he was born in 2005, and I think it was around 2008, 2009 when I really started becoming vocal about it after really researching it. I definitely talked to friends who were having babies at the time and was like, hey, you know, there's really no reason to circumcise, but I wasn't... I didn't go out of my way to send them information, and now I wish I would have. And really getting involved with Your Whole Baby and Bloodstained Men is what pushed me to really get that info out to people, and card places, and keep cards in my purse to hand to friends and family and things like that.
So you got more involved before I really started seriously getting involved.
Yeah, I'm the one that dragged John into it.
And now you're regretting it a little bit, right? Because here I am spending all my days
yeah.
trying to educate people, trying to figure out ways to get in front of people about this. Okay, so as I've been doing for all these interviews, I have a list of topics that I cover, and they're in a particular order. So, one leads to the next, which leads to the next, etc., etc. So I'm going to start going through those, and you speak up if you have points to add to it.
Okay.
So the major topics are, first, the physical harms to males for male circumcision. I don't really get into the female side of it because it seems like the mainstream media has covered the whole female genital mutilation or female circumcision side of things, and most people just accept that, yeah, it's a horrible thing. And then I get into how that affects partnerships sexually, right? And then the psychological effects, not only to the people that have been cut generally, and so these apply across the board. It doesn't matter what sex you are. If you're generally cut, you're psychologically harmed. And then how it affects the relationships between all people, not just your sexual partners, but others as well. And then I talk a little bit about FGM and intersex normalization surgery and stuff like that, and how it all intersects and how it's all born out of the same stuff. And then I get into a little bit about how this affects social productivity in the world. And then the very last thing I added recently to this is talking about forced retraction and how that harms and why that's going on. So first is the physical side, and I like to use the word acropation. This is something that John Geishiker used. I've heard of the word before, but he did a presentation at a baby fest in Bellevue, Washington, close to Seattle. Mm-hmm. And one of the first things he showed was an image of a statue where the man was intact, and you saw the part hanging off the end past the glands of the penis. Right? So I've got my my mock penis here. Lighting it up to light gray here. Okay, to continue. Alright, so I was talking about the acropation, and that would be the part, again, that would be the part that would be hanging past the glands. So, if you haven't learned this yet, the inner mucosa of the male prepuce is attached during early childhood, and sometimes doesn't become detached fully until all the way up until like someone's 20. Sometimes I've spoken with one guy that didn't start disconnecting until in his 20s. But the point is that the acropation was all that used to be cut off before like 130 AD or whatever, and they call it the rabbinical version of the cut, or of brit milah, and call it brit priah, right? You're a Bible expert yourself, so
I'm not an expert.
Well, you went to college for the topic, so I'm looking for you to verify some of this. But the point is the rabbis found out that the men were out doing sports in the nude would hang, basically the Olympics back then, would hang weights and stuff off of their foreskin, their prepuce, to try to cover up the glands, because it was viewed poorly by others to have your glands showing. Right? The whole idea is that if your glands are showing, you're ready for sex, right? That's the view. So, in order to attempt to stop having Jewish men do that, they decided to start cutting off more. And there's been some studies, particularly the Sorrells study, that has identified that, well, that is sensitive skin. Don't know why we needed a study to prove that. Just ask intact men, is that sensitive? Does that feel like something there? Are there nerves in there? Is there blood in there? Yeah, hey, even myself, before Jackson came along, I kind of assumed that was something that was vestigial or whatever, and there had to be good reason for cutting it off. I didn't know whether it was puff skin. I didn't even realize that was a double fold of skin that kind of unfolds as your penis gets erect. So, and it's there to protect the glands. It's much like your cheeks and your lips are there to protect the inside of your mouth, and your eyes are there to protect your eyes. The glands is supposed to be covered in kind of like an internal organ, like your tongue. And that provides again, I was showing how is a fold of skin, so it unfolds as the corpus cavernosum fills with blood and creates an erection for the male. Right, that's why you saw that rolls down. So that kind of creates a rolling mechanism. I often show it like this, it's like inside the orifice or whatever, right? And as it goes inward, you have less friction. So I'm not the skin, or in this case the yarn, isn't sliding in my hand, but the penis is inserting into the orifice. So that's the rolling mechanism. And again, just like your eyes and the inside of your mouth, it would be moist in there. Not only the glands would be moist, but the intermucosal part of the prepuce is also moist. And that contributes lubrication to the act of having sex. So not only, it's not completely 100% dependent on the female to have the lubrication. And this is good, because when, unless things really open up, and you and I, we do a lot of foreplay. There's no quickies for us.
I didn't know you were going to delve into our sex life.
Hey, you're my wife, and this is reality, and we have to talk about it for people to realize the harm.
You could have warned me.
Would you still have done it? So having that lubrication helps even get things started. It would be very nice if I knew that in person, but this is what I hear. It's like something to help things get going without having to build things up. And then there's two last things that get harmed when this is all cut off. So you have the outer layer, you have the inner layer, you have the frenulum, and there's a couple little pieces of yarn there that kind of express that there's a frenulum there. That's the part that's on the bottom of the gland, starts underneath the bottom of the gland, and it stretches down to the inner mucosa. And a lot like the frenulum underneath your tongue, it kind of anchors things. So when the penis starts relaxing again, and the blood leaves the corpus cavernosum, it pulls the prepuce back up onto the clamps. And then there's the ridged band. And many intact men have told me how the ridged band is its own special thing. I kind of compare it often to lips. You like to kiss, right? Lips are sensitive and all that. Well, the prepuce, and this isn't a really good example because this isn't stretchy. It's not like squeezing near the end of the penis. But you look at a regular penis, and you often see that it tightens up.
Sphincter.
Yeah, it's like kind of like a sphincter. Exactly. And at the end of that is referred to as the ridged band. And it's highly innervated, and what I understand is when the penis starts becoming erect and it starts pushing up, what happens is that stretches out in order to go around the glans, and that's why the glans is shaped. Well, one of the reasons why the glans is shaped, kind of like a helmet. But that process of stretching out in itself is its own erogenous thing that's happening. Okay, so those are all the parts that are removed or harmed. Now, the frenulum isn't always 100% ablated. It depends on the kind of cut. You got the clamps that go over the top, like the Jewish barzel goes this way, and the Mogen Clamp goes this way. So what they do is they pull the skin up, and then they put the clamp over the top. Then they try to avoid clamping the glands. But accidents happen way too often. That's why the Mogen Clamp got the Mogen Company got sued out of existence. But the thing is, when you have a clamp like that, what happens is the inner mucosa is left behind. So you have a lot more inner mucosa. And if you look at enough penises, you'll notice that on some penises you have a large amount of inner mucosa, and sometimes you have very, very little. In the cases where there's very, very little, most likely what happened is they used either a Plastibell or a Gomco Clamp. So those methods are intended to resolve the problem that happened with the Mogen Clamp. In order to protect the glands, they stick the bell over. But then, instead of cutting up here, it gets cut down here near the coronal ridge of the glands. And that ends up leaving a lot less inner mucosa. And since that leaves less inner mucosa, that ablates more of the frenular area. And if you look at the Sorrells study, you'll notice that the frenular area is like the most erogenous, sensitive part. And Glenn Callender from Canada Foreskin Awareness Project, he actually talks about it, and I guess he does presentations. You don't get to see his presentation, of course, because it's very graphic. But you see him in the American Circumcision documentary, where he does these presentations. So for me, I'm kind of lucky because I'm pretty sure I was cut with a Mogen Clamp. Right, so I have far more inner mucosa, therefore my frenular area was left behind. And I never took the time to really pay attention to that detail. Right? I didn't. And when having sex, I never really paid attention to exact details about exactly what's going on my penis in particular areas. Right. And after learning about this stuff, it's like, oh yeah, it is a very, very sensitive spot. When I'm getting closer, that's the part that it kind of lights up the most, is right in the frenular area. So some men have been cut so severely that it's like they were free-handed, where the whole frenular area was carved out. Yeah. And according to John Geisiger, when he did a presentation at the Baby Fest, he says that men that are cut like that, they end up being like impotent, unfortunately. So, with all those parts being removed, there's various damages that occur. So one of them is, the first one is the hairy shaft. So since the skin isn't here to unroll down the penis as it becomes erect, instead it starts pulling up on the scrotum and also pulls on the pelvic floor, on the top. So in order to explain it, to show it better, is okay. So if you have like the top of the penis here and the bottom of the penis, down here, and like the body here, scrotum down here, the scrotum is getting drawn up onto the penis, onto the shaft. And I've seen some, images of guys where the let's stick to the hairy shaft first. So since the scrotum is hairy, and I'm a hairy guy, you can tell with all my hair, my arm and all that, I have a hairy scrotum, and having that hair on my shaft is not a lot of fun. And that leads to the testes. So the testes are inside the scrotum, right? So when I was younger, and this is more before you and I met, but my scrotum would draw my testes upward to the point where I became comfortable. Right? Guys don't like getting kicked in the nuts, right? Well, getting the testes squeezed isn't all that comfortable either. But when I was in my teens and my 20s, it would go so far as to sometimes pull one of my testes into my body. Yeah, one would kind of pop inside of my body, and I'd have to stop having sex or whatever in the middle and say, okay, I gotta take a break here and relax things. And I'd have to I learned how to control my erection so it didn't fill so much, which means that it doesn't become as hard, but it also doesn't draw my scrotum up so much to put one of the testes inside my body. And I'd have to relax things, push the testes back out, and then I can continue and try to finish.
That does not sound fun.
It wasn't. It was absolutely yeah. And I had, again, I was just probably something that a lot of guys probably deal with, whatever. I had no idea. Never connected it to circumcision.
Yeah, now you know a lot of cut guys deal with that, not intact guys.
Yeah. And there's one guy that I actually interviewed that said that he's had the same problem. So I'm definitely not unique in that area. So I was also getting to the pelvic floor. So again, the top of the penis going to the bottom of the stomach, and and this still happens, but when it gets erect, instead of just going out of the body and the skin unfolding down onto the penis, my skin up here gets tight, so it kind of acts like a crane and it pulls the penis upward. Now, for you and I, you like to have body-to-body contact, so it's not much a problem for you and I very often. But there's another angle or another type of sex that you don't like having. I kind of wonder if it's because of this problem that you aren't comfortable with that.
We can talk about that off camera.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, anyways, but I've had partners where they wanted to do certain positions which would pull my penis back down, and when it's erect like that, it doesn't feel comfortable doing that. And I often compare this to balloons that you use to make animals. Yeah, exactly like that. And if you bend those balloons, you see that they kink, right? Well, those are filled with air. This gets filled with blood, and gets a lot stiffer, a lot harder. So it's one thing to get bent once. It's totally another to get bent twice.
I wonder how many men who end up breaking their penises during sex and have to go to the ER have been circumcised and have that issue.
Exactly. Yeah. And it would be interesting to see if there were any way to get statistics for that.
Yeah.
It's probably not in an easy database to just do a query. Or to even collect all the information from various different hospitals and clinics and urologists and all that, and then correlate that. It'd be nice to know. Mm-hmm. Maybe a study could be done someday. But yeah, so yeah, a penis can be broken, and the way I understand it, what happens is the corpus cavernosum is what breaks. Right? It's inside the penis, so you end up with internal bleeding. And that's a serious problem, and you definitely need to go to the doctor for that and all that.
Yeah, if your penis breaks during sex, don't wait. You have to go to the ER immediately.
Yeah. So, luckily, I have not had that happen yet.
Thank goodness.
But yeah, I definitely have had cases where I was like, oh, I can't go that far, or whatever. You know. Okay, so yeah, that was the pelvic floor. Oh, myelostenosis, and I had myelostenosis when I'm thinking I was 8 years old. I have a very vivid memory of it. I was at my grandparents' house. My favorite grandparents. They're all dead now, so I can say that. But my grandmother got frustrated because I was making a mess when I was standing up at the toilet and all that, and she realized that I was like spraying in multiple directions. I wasn't a single stream. So she took me to the doctor. And the doctor looked and was like, oh, you have a little bridge across your meatus where the clothes was coming out. And so he took a little scalpel and cut it. It didn't hurt me or anything because it was just scar tissue. Right? There's no nerves in it. And that was that. It was, it was enough of an event that I remember it very vividly, but not so much that I feel traumatized by it. But as far as I understand, some men somewhere in their childhood had much worse issues than I had there. And it's a very, very common thing. In fact, Brian Earp, he tweeted a couple weeks ago or so, and it sounds like 1/3 or so of circumcised boys end up having some form of myelostenosis. Now they call it stenosis because the idea is that the end closes up, and it kind of makes sense because it's the body trying to protect itself or whatever, because it's not supposed to be exposed all the time like that to air and to underwear and whatever else. So it does, it's not unusual for it to close up. I mean, a lot of guys probably don't even realize that they have it because it's been going on all their lives. And I think even I have a certain level of it still because he didn't make my hole bigger. He just cut out that little skin bridge so I don't spray all over the place. And then there are skin bridges that occur between the inner mucosa and the glands. Right? I don't know if you've seen any of these pictures.
I don't want to see the pictures.
Okay. So, since the inner mucosa and the glands are normally attached during childhood, the body tries to recover. Right? Scar tissue is a normal process of the human body, right? So, if the penis relaxes after, shortly after it's been previously amputated, and there's, the inner mucosa comes up in contact with the glands again, it's not too surprising that the body tries to reattach between the inner mucosa and the glands, and then sometimes that causes skin bridges if it's not fixed right away. And I've come across guys that would have to stick a Q-tip in between underneath the coronal ridge and their inner mucosa to clean that out. It's kind of crazy when you think, well, we're doing it for hygiene reasons. Well, that doesn't sound like very hygienic to me at all. That is not something that I want to have to do. Thankfully, I don't have that. Erectile dysfunction is something that occurs with this, supposedly far more often than for intact men. And erectile dysfunction comes from two things, right? You have something physically wrong, one thing. Well, if you're missing a lot of your sense of erogenous tissue, well, that would make sense. But then there's also the psychological aspect of it that would affect you having erectile dysfunction. If you learn that you're missing an important part of your body down there, it can be disturbing, especially if you're thinking about it when having sex. So you kind of have to put that out of your mind if you're going to avoid having erectile dysfunction. And it's sometimes a challenge for me too.
Yeah, I know someone who has had erectile dysfunction in their 30s, early 30s, and I don't know it directly from him. I know it from his now ex-wife. And I have often wondered, after I learned about the harms of circumcision, if it was because he had so much erogenous tissue taken away that he just had no feeling left.
Yeah.
So.
And it's not just the feeling of that you're missing that erogenous tissue. I mean, that's a lot of erogenous tissue that's removed, but also and I've heard this from both intact men as well as restored men. The glands
Callus.
is calloused up. Yeah, it builds up tissue around it. You can, like intact men, they can like pull themselves back and then try to keep themselves back and have them hanging around inside their underwear and stuff like that. And yeah, they absolutely hate it. They're like, well, why would you do this, boy? Anyways, there's one guy that did a video on YouTube that outright said that. It's like, yeah, I tried that one time. I was like, no, heck no, absolutely no, not gonna do that to myself. So you're reducing sensation, removing sensitive tissue, and reducing sensation all at the same time. Okay, so then there's premature ejaculation, and I learned this recently, or made this connection real recently. I just keep coming up with more connections with all this. Someone else, when I was doing an interview, helped me see this. It's like, oh my gosh, Mother Nature was really thinking about this, right? So the frenulum is being the most sensitive area. Well, that's inside there. When the prepuce is rolled up, it's inside. It's protected. It's not rubbing against anything yet. Now, when it goes inside, all of a sudden, it's rubbing against something. Now, you want to ejaculate, or Mother Nature wants you to ejaculate at least, when you're deep inside, as close to the uterus as possible, right? So you get the
cervix.
The cervix. Thank you. She's a trained doula. Because you want the sperm to go inside the uterus, not the vaginal canal. I don't know that the sperm can swim that well way up and through all that, right? So yeah.
No, it can.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure it can. Yeah. But anyways, it improves chances though if it goes right directly into the uterus. So you don't want to have ejaculation here. As soon as with the circumcised, the fully preputially amputated penis, if this very sensitive area is coming in contact with the vagina right here, and you might have ejaculation there instead of in here. And then last but not least,
So I have a question.
Okay.
Does the frenulum, is it designed to line up with the woman's G-spot?
Well, from what I understand, the G-spot on the woman is up here. So
It would depend on the angle.
So yeah, so like inside the hole, inside the vaginal hole, it's up here. So the ridge, the coronal ridge, I think is manipulating that as it goes in and out, right? At least that's the way I understand it. I'm tempted to take a class on sexology and become an official sexologist. Maybe we could get Dr. Doe from Sexplanations to talk to us sometime about this, or Caitlin B. That's it with a C, Caitlin, Caitlin, V, letter V. Maybe people reach out to her and say, hey, interview with John and tell him how it all supposed to work. But yeah, so, and I actually, there's a porn site where, I think it's Pornhub, where there's actually interviews with porn stars that actually talk about pros and cons of having sex with an intact penis. And
that would be interesting.
Yeah. And one of the ladies actually said, well, I kind of like circumcised guys because their mushroom top, the glands is a little bigger. And supposedly that's true. But at the same time, there's studies that show that the circumcised guy is also smaller overall. And that makes sense if the skin is holding things back a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, general botches. One of the things that happens, I hear
Do we
this.
have to do botches?
Just real quick. So they can cut, at an angle, right? You're dealing with teeny tiny little penis, right? So when they put that bell on, or they put that clamp on, or whatever, if they don't put it on at a perfect 90-degree angle, anyone that's an engineer who knows angles and how important they are when you're cutting wood or cutting metal or whatever, then you end up having too short a skin on one side or the other. So not, like for me, I have this curvature upward towards my stomach, but for some men, they have curvatures to the sides, one or another. So that's another kind of botch. And then you have the worst kinds of botches, like David Reamer, who got his penis burnt off.
Wait, burnt?
Yeah, they were using a cautery tool.
Why?
To keep it from bleeding. Right? They do that kind of thing with lots of amputation stuff. I thought they'll use cautery tools to make things close up so it doesn't bleed. So yeah, sometimes they've used that.
I didn't know that's
yeah.
the mistake that happened.
So what David Reamer, from what I understand, is someone bumped the dial and made it way too hot or whatever, and zap. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so there's horrible botches like that. And then there are, I don't know whether you call them botches or not, there are cases where babies die, over a year just in the United States alone.
Bleed to death. Heart attack, stroke.
Lungs bursting. Yeah. And some, who knows what the doctor's going to write down on the death certificate. So we don't really even know accurate statistics, because they could just write it out as, oh, you had a defective heart. Doesn't write down that it happened, during
a traumatic experience.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I think I got all the. There's probably other botches I keep forgetting. There's so many.
Let's just move on.
Yeah. So that's all the physical harms to the male. Now, this affects heterosexual sex, right?
It also affects homosexual sex.
Yep, I got it written down too.
Intersex sex. It affects all sex.
Yeah, exactly. Anal and homosexual docking, but it's not with heterosexual sex. So, I look at the labia, and we got construction going on over there. They're getting noisy together. And I think about the prepuce coming in contact with the labia, right? And if the labia is typically closed, right? It's kind of flat like that, right? And if the penis isn't too aroused or too erect like that, or if you have a previously amputated penis, when it comes into contact with that, I did some videos. I don't know if you looked at them, but one, and I did this at our previous place. But what I did is try to stick your finger into your fist. You start feeling the friction and everything right away, and it's not easy to push your finger in. Right. Then I took a rubber glove and cut off the finger part, and I took a little bit of double-sided tape on the tip of my finger to make for the glands, right? And then put the glove on, and then I doubled it up. not before I doubled up. I put a little bit of Vaseline on there to act like the lubrication, the moisture on the.
Don't use Vaseline in real life for lubrication. It won't work.
Okay. KY jelly or something like that. Anyway, and then I doubled it up, and then did another video where I just like, whoop. Wow, that's super, totally different. It's like you don't feel any pushback or anything. It just slides right in. So easy because it's not only do you have that little bit of lubrication, but you have that rolling mechanism unrolling. So it's really easy to get going. So hey, quickie time. Yeah. And also because there's no lubrication there, and it's sliding in and out. Every time you slide out, especially with that coronal ridge, dragging things out, goes out in the air, dries out, goes back in, brings more lubrication out. The vagina wasn't designed to produce that much lubrication that fast. Some women produce far more than others. But I've heard plenty of cases where women feel, after so many minutes of sex, that they have to. It starts to feel like
dry, chafing,
yeah,
uncomfortable, bleeding, pain.
So I've learned to make shorter strokes and slow things down. I have more foreplay and all that stuff in order to compensate for my lack of my foreskin. Any other thoughts on how heterosexual sex is impacted?
Well, I mean, then there's less chance that the woman is going to orgasm because there's not the friction that's meant to, the good friction that's meant to happen inside the vagina, because the vagina is ribbed, so it's supposed to have, something pulling back and forth, not just a stick.
Yeah, trying out stick.
So there's less of a chance that she is going to orgasm from penetration alone. So.
And that reminds me, I keep forgetting about this, but with the ridge band, the ridge band it kind of like, if you look at ribbed condoms, it's got those ribs on there, and
mimics the foreskin.
Yeah, exactly. If ribbed condoms are supposedly good for females, well, imagine having a ridge band, Oh yeah. Any other thoughts on heterosexual? So for females that have a partner that is circumcised and they've had times where they have dried out, then they fear that it will happen again, right? Mm-hmm. So that fear, just like erectile dysfunction for men, if you're having negative thoughts about your own sexuality or whatever, if the woman is worried that it's going to happen, then that's not going to help her stay lubricated, right?
Right.
I mean, the brain is the largest sexual organ we have.
Right. It was kind of that way after Jackson was born. Like, you're supposed to wait so many weeks until the woman quits bleeding to have sex again, and we did that, and it was painful. It was not enjoyable, and so then I just clammed up and I didn't want to have sex after that. So it was a process to get back to being sexually active after Jackson was born. So and part of it was because I did tear with Jackson, but yeah, so it depends on situations and health and what has happened, if there's been trauma to the vagina or the surrounding tissue and things like that.
And you talked about tearing, but that was with birth. But because I didn't understand how things worked as well as I do now, I don't think this happened with you, but with previous sex partners for myself, I have torn them. And I've heard of men getting torn themselves that were circumcised because they're in mycosis, then skin and nail tear. But yeah, because I get me and my partner, we would get too excited or whatever and want to jump into it, and I go to dive in and end up tearing her, and that's not good.
Not fun.
No. So yeah. So plenty of effects on heterosexual partnerships. And there's anal. And with anal you have no lubrication, right? So that lubrication and that rolling mechanism is definitely valuable for anal sex. So not a whole lot else to say on that one. And then the last thing is the homosexual docking. Now, homosexual docking is not possible without at least one intact partner. And I've heard this from gay men all the time, is that
or bi men.
Or bi men, that the intact male is highly sought after, especially in certain areas of the U.S. where the cut rates were really high in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So that's where it would be nice to have two penises here, but
Where are your other?
I've gave them all out.
Oh.
Purchased 8 and I'm down to 1.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, this was after one guy, Mitchell. He bought one, and he managed to get it colored like the Sorrells study.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, and I'd like to pick it on Jim Jeffries on this one, because Jim Jeffries actually did an episode where he went and interviewed Alan Cerrone. You know him. Alan Cerrone is the one guy that protested bloodstained pants in Israel. Television.
Okay, yeah. Now I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So he went and interviewed Alan, and he shared videos or images of like Jonathan Conte and others, protesting and kind of, he mocked us and made fun of us and all that a little bit. But he also made fun of homosexual docking. So made motions up there on stage and all that. But yeah, so the idea is that the glands of one partner go inside the prepuce of the other partner, and why it feels similar to vagina. I don't know. Okay, and then so that's all the sexual partnership things that I covered. Then there's a psychological effect. There's starting off with the trauma of the cut itself. And there's been various studies done to try to identify, how much pain there is involved and stuff like that. And I think
there was a study done in Canada that they had to stop because it was so ethically unacceptable. There was obvious trauma done to the brain, and they had to quit doing the study because it was just unethical to continue. So, I mean, to me that speaks volumes that, if they couldn't even finish the study, then why are we still doing it to innocent infants that have no voice?
Yeah, clearly torture of human beings. Sure, maybe they don't, vividly remember it, but some people like myself and Jay Jackson, who wrote this book right here, Circumcision Scar, for the viewers, and others that I've come across too, have had like dreams. And the dream that I used to have, I don't know if I've told you this, I used to have this dream frequently, or nightmare, where something was about to happen to me that would be horrible, right? I don't know what it was, but I saw a person approaching me, and I couldn't move, do anything to protect myself or run or anything. So I don't know where that came from, other than being circumcised when I was a baby.
Yeah. Do you know if they used a circumstrain?
I don't know any details. Unless I pay some money to get some stuff out of the archives from the government.
You have to pay for that?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I thought Freedom of Information Act.
You should be able to just...
I know. I looked into it. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's disappointing.
Yeah. So yeah, and I called...
Because I was able to get my grandfather's records from the hospital he died in. And I didn't pay any money for that. And you are asking for yourself, not for a relative.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is it because it's military?
Maybe. I did call the military hospital, and they were like, oh yeah, they'd be all in archives, and you have to go to the U.S. government archives and...
that is so weird.
Request them that way.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I actually called the FBI the other day. I don't know if I told you that. Yeah, and it said, hey, you guys do know that this torture is going on by the thousands every day. And, why aren't you guys investigating it? And, the guy was pretty much dismissive of me. So, well, you need to contact your medical board for your state. I'm like, yeah, I already did. They think that it's legal. They couldn't tell me where it's written down that it's legal, but they think that it's legal. So, why isn't the FBI, doing something to say, hey, yes, it's not written anywhere that you're allowed to do this, But if you run into someone in like CPS or FBI that is biased, they have their own cognitive dissonance to deal with on this because they're cut their child or whatever. They're not likely to, if they don't have to, they're not likely to take anything further. But it is recorded, right? The call was recorded at the FBI, so they have my name and address and phone number and the whole works. So they can't say that someone didn't call them.
Yeah.
All right, and then there's the trauma from the discoveries of the loss in the arm, and I'm introverted, right? And this I think this is the reason why I didn't get involved when you were first getting involved with intactivism.
And for those that don't know, I'm an extrovert and he is an introvert. So I was all gung-ho on getting into this, and just like it was all I could think about. It was to the point where I was not sleeping at night because the trauma of what I had just read and the pictures I had seen and the videos I had watched just replayed over and over and over in my mind, and the feeling of helplessness and not being able to stop it from happening to every single child just tore me apart.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that's how I feel. I have a hard time sleeping too. And I'm directly affected. I feel both sides. You know how Jesus said, what you do for me, or what you do for the least of these, you do for me? I really relate to that. Because when I see people speaking out to protect children, it feels like they're doing it for me. It's like they're trying to protect me. And it warms my heart. And at the same time, when I see people that are just defending ritual genital cutting practices, it hurts myself. So
you were saying you're an introvert.
Yeah. So that means that I process my grief internally, right?
And I don't. I would be all upset and complaining to John, and he just would sit there and silently listen, and I don't know what he was thinking, but I'm sure he thought I was nuts at first.
No, I did not. No, I think I was having a hard time absorbing it and hearing it because I'm the one that's cut, right? So, and you have the process of the stages of grief, right? The denial and the bargaining and all that. And I processed that all in my head. But I didn't only process it once because I didn't learn about one harm. As I listed earlier, acropostosis, skin, glands protection, rolling mechanism, all these things, right? I didn't get it all at one time. It wasn't presented to me all at one time. So I didn't, and even if it was presented to me all at one time, I don't know that I would have been able to hear it all at one time.
Yeah, it's a lot of information to take in all at once.
Yeah.
And even if you do hear it all at one time, it's so much information coming at you all at once. It's going to take a few times hearing the same thing to catch, like, oh my gosh, I didn't remember that, or how did they say that before and I didn't catch it? And it's like watching the documentary American Circumcision. It's so packed full of information. You have to watch it more than once to catch everything.
Yeah, I've watched it probably hundreds of times now. I just like have it over in a little window watching or listening to it while I'm working away doing some, mindless work. But yeah, and so I've gotten the names down really well, like Andrew Friedman and Edgar Schoen and Brian Morris, and and some of the details of that film. And some people probably think of me as just absolutely crazy to watch that multiple times, because some intensively can't even watch it once because they know what's going to happen to that baby that they see at the very beginning.
It's not the same baby.
Well, whatever. It doesn't matter.
I know.
It doesn't matter.
I know.
It's just the thought of a baby getting cut is hard to deal with.
Yeah, it was hard for me to watch it, and I haven't watched it more than once. I know there's other information in there that I probably missed on the first time I watched it, but I cannot watch that again. It's just too much. It's coming, and I don't want to watch it again.
Yeah. So it seems to me like when I look back at my process is that I go through the stages of grief and then come out of it, and then I like learn something else, hear something else, or make another connection about how I'm harmed, and then I go through it again and again and over and over and over again. That's why it took me so many years, and I kind of, in some ways, I feel embarrassed that I didn't start speaking out sooner. But at the same time, I realize that's just, I had to go through that process to get where I am now. And those things have been very traumatic, and at least the next thing, which is suicide. We know Jonathan Conte very well because he was not just a very avid advocate that got guys like Brother K rolling, who is, they've got Bloodstained Men going now and doing billboards and everything now, and they got rolling, I think, partly because of Jonathan, but Jonathan committed suicide. And you've got David Reamer and Alex Hardy.
Died by suicide.
Okay. Died by suicide. Thank you. And I've done 2 interviews. You haven't been watching my interviews, but one woman's husband committed suicide.
Died by suicide.
Died by suicide. Because, she doesn't know 100% for sure whether it was not, but she did know that he was not happy about what happened to him, the baby. And another guy whose buddy died by suicide, and he's very well convinced that's the major factor of why he committed suicide, died by suicide.
Yeah.
I'll have to remember that one. Died by suicide. Yeah.
And there's been other ones as well. David Reamer.
Yeah, I said that.
Oh, you did? Sorry, I missed that.
David Reamer and his twin, both. Even though his twin didn't. Yeah, they both.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Oh, twins are very.
I know. I knew David Reamer. I didn't know that his twin also took his own life.
So yeah, it happens, and I don't think we've seen the end of that, because it seems like it's the internet that's making this information come out, right?
It's more available. It's at your fingertips. Yeah. You can find it anywhere. All you have to do is Google it, and there it is. And
you can see a whole shelf and a half of books right there. Those didn't exist back when I was born.
Yeah.
So the information is definitely becoming more available, and there's guys out protesting, or people out protesting and all that. So more and more men are going to be sort of questioning, well, how am I harmed? How am I harmed? Or they're going to hide from it, and ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing that I kick myself with, is that Jackson, both my boys, very well could have been victims of circumcision, and it was my own fault because I didn't research. I was researching car seats, I was researching the best cribs and things like that, but it never occurred to me to research circumcision. I didn't even know what the procedure entailed. All I knew was that they made a cut and it was extra skin, and that's all I knew. And I don't know why it never occurred to me to research it, but I
I've
will
got an idea.
be forever thankful for our midwife, Michelle Antonich, for handing me that info packet.
So there's two things, right? Doctors, we're supposed to trust. We trust doctors, right?
Trust doctors.
And we don't have much other choice, right? And then society, right? It's being done so widely.
Why would you do it if it would be harmful?
Yeah, exactly. What would be going on in the hospital of all things, right? I mean, if it was happening out in back rooms or something like that, shady, and it was considered illegal and all that, then that would be another thing. But it's going on in hospitals by the thousands every single day.
Yeah, and if I would have stayed with my OB, I have no doubt that Jackson would have been circumcised. And I am so thankful that I switched to a midwife when I did. So.
And when it comes to cribs and stuff like that, it's normal to question companies. Right.
Yeah, because you research, you have consumer reports that tells you the best of this, the best of that, and I had gone to Consumer Reports for car seats because I want to make sure we got the best car seat, the safest car seat, things like that. And then, with all the baby products, you want to make sure that you get the best one on the market so that your child hopefully doesn't die of SIDS or whatever else might happen. And so
Consumer Reports needs to do a thing on circumcision.
Healthcare.
Yeah.
Consumer Reports for healthcare.
That'd be interesting.
That would be
absolutely.
good.
Absolutely. Definitely. Well, that kind of jumped.
But I think now you have to pay for Consumer Reports.
Yeah.
When Jackson was born, you didn't have to pay for the results, and now I think you do.
They have to make their money somehow, and they can't do advertising because then that would make them biased. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we jumped forward a little bit on something here, but that's good information. Children, how children are impacted, and I feel sad.
Are you talking about children that have it done to them, or children who
there's
end
that.
up viewing?
There's that, but there's just children, even our own children, that even though they weren't cut, they're impacted by this, right? And I've been using Greta Thunberg a lot on this one because I read her dad's explanation of what led Greta into activism, what led her to the UN to give that great speech that ripped them apart. But she went into depression for a while. Did you know that?
I heard you talking about it.
Yeah. So, and I often wonder whether our own sons will, have some level of depression because they see stuff like this going on in the world, and I see it as such a huge problem, huge challenge that is maybe insurmountable for whatever. And
it's not just circumcision that is a huge
I
problem.
know. No, that's what I was feeling.
Yeah.
Right. There's all sorts of things in there. And the humans have come a long ways. We used to be far more barbaric than we are nowadays. So, there's clearly some hope. I mean, slavery has supposedly been, addressed.
Well, I mean, has it?
Yeah, I know. That can be debated too, but we're not chopping off heads and lynching people nearly as much as we used to and stuff like that, right? We're not having world wars, at least not yet. But yeah, so it's worrisome. I worry about our children. Of course, not just our own children, but I've seen children out protesting and holding signs and even talking about how they feel about this topic, and I feel sad that they have to. So there's a psychological impact on, when it comes down to it, everyone. That's why part of why I'm doing this is I'm trying to point out that this virtual genital cutting thing that's going on in the world, it is affecting everyone, not just the people that have been cut. And then we have medical professionals, and you being a doula, kind of a medical professional.
I am not a medical professional.
Well, anyway.
No, I'm serious.
I know you're not.
Midwives are medical professionals.
I know.
Doulas
It's
do
great,
not
you-
do
I
medical
know.
stuff.
Yes, I know.
We work with medical professionals. How's that? Okay.
You work with people that are being dealt with at medical level too, though. When you're helping a woman through labor or whatever, and you yourself cut out any clients that were insistent on cutting their son.
Except one, and I regret taking that person on as a client for multiple reasons, but especially because they were adamant on cutting their son.
Yeah. So imagine being someone that knows, like you and I know, and working in a hospital or a clinic that might do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't met anyone that's against it that actually works in a clinic, small. But I do know people in the movement that work at hospitals, and even still do, and they've shared their.
Yeah, and depending on what hospital or clinic you work at, they may or may not even perform circumcisions. I know, I don't know if all Providence hospitals are like that, but I know the Providence Hospital in Olympia, Washington does not perform circumcisions. I don't know if they ever did, but I know right now they do not.
They're based on Catholicism, right?
Yeah.
And Catholicism is.
But not all Catholic hospitals.
I know. I do know this because I'm now the webmaster for Catholics Against Circumcision, even though I'm not Catholic.
Yes, yes, you are not even Christian, so I don't know how you got that position.
Yeah.
But anyway, I know there are some Catholic hospitals that do perform it. I know there's one in Oxnard near us. I don't know if they perform it, but I, for some reason, have the idea that they do.
I think they do. Dignity Health.
No, St. John's.
St. John's is Dignity Health. Yeah.
You would think dignity.
I tagged Dignity Health a couple times on Twitter after doing the protest recently.
Yeah, so it's interesting how different organizations view it. And Seventh-day Adventist, you would think that since they are vegetarians, that they would not. I mean, not the hospital is a vegetarian, but the religion, the movement, they strive to be very healthy and mindful and things like that. So I don't know if Seventh-day Adventist hospitals, like the one in Simi, I don't know if they perform them or not.
Well, I went to the Simi Valley Hospital and talked to them, and told them who I was and all that, and they didn't have an open conversation with me. And I also protested there. And they never said that they.
But do they even have a birthing unit there? I don't think they do. I think it's like.
Well, where else would people go in Simi Valley? Because
is that the only hospital?
That's the only hospital in Simi Valley.
Really?
Yes.
There was two.
No, there's urgent cares all over the place, but.
Interesting. No, I thought. Okay. No, I was thinking it was like the hospital in Cedar Woolley where they didn't have a labor and delivery unit. I don't know. Anyway.
Oh well. Okay, so that's children, unless you have any other. Oh, no, medical professionals, sorry. Parents. Psychological effects on parents. And you and I came very close to having Jackson cut, and sometimes when I think about that, it just makes me sick. That happened.
I get really upset when I think about how close we were to doing that, and how I was so easily swayed by my OB not saying one word or the other, just checked a box and moved on to another question.
Yeah. Now you might want to try this. I went out to Google's Maps and looked up the hospital and did a review, and even put in some pictures. And I shared the review too with other people, but no one could see it. So I'm wondering if Google is censoring it.
Oh, interesting.
No, I don't know if you want to do the same thing.
And we also have family that work at Island Hospital now.
I don't know if they absolutely still do. I know one is not there anymore.
I know one isn't, but I thought the other one was.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. So any other thoughts on how parents are as being parents?
It's interesting when trying, this is not exactly the same thing. It's interesting when I try to share information with expecting parents, how they aren't overjoyed that their son does not have to have an unnecessary surgery. Instead, a lot of the response is they dig in their heels and insist that it is a good thing and then unfriend me and refuse to talk to me ever again. So the cognitive dissonance, or whatever you want to call it, is just astounding to me. I don't get it. I don't understand how people couldn't be overjoyed that their child doesn't need a cosmetic surgery.
Or at least very appreciative of the information, whether they agree with it or not.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always appreciative of people sharing information with me, even if I don't agree with it.
And I want to make sure I get this point across, is that I do not shove it in their face. I'm not like, hey, don't do this because you're a horrible parent if you do. I don't approach it like that at all. I usually congratulate them, say I'm super excited for them, and I'm like, hey, this is a website that I have found really helpful for parents of boys. I have 2 sons myself. And this has happened with friends, this has happened with family, and this has happened with acquaintances. So I have a lot of family and friends who no longer speak to me because of this issue.
Yeah, that it jumps down to one of the relationship things we'll probably cover again, but yeah, it's frustrating and sad all at the same time. I've had at least one friend who I know cut her son, reached out to me and said, you know, keep doing this, keep spreading the information, keep sharing. So, you know, sometimes we'll keep hoping that some of these friends and family will see the light someday. Unfortunately, it'll be too late for their sons, but maybe it'll be soon enough for their grandsons.
Yeah.
Okay, and then this even psychologically affects intact people. And I say people because I'm not just saying men, or intact men, because I can imagine women, I think I've even seen some of this. You look at enough of the documentaries on FGM, or female circumcision, and you see some women that refuse to get cut. And the pressure on them seems extensive, right? So they're psychologically being impacted too, because they're not, you know, they're not part of a clan anymore or whatever. People might be turning their backs on them or whatever. So same thing with intact men. I've heard from intact men how they say sometimes that when they were growing up, they felt ashamed or whatever because they were intact.
Yeah, I have a family member who didn't cut their son because they didn't have the money for it at the time, and the son has grown up thinking that he is negatively impacted by not having been circumcised, and so wants to have himself circumcised as an adult. And it's really disappointing to hear that, even after other family members have reached out to him trying to educate him on how lucky he is that he wasn't.
Yeah. And we've known men in the movement. Nikos Koutsouras is one that showed up on the documentary, who says, you know, he really wishes that he didn't do it. He did it because of the pressure. There's a famous show, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, on Netflix, where a young guy, like 16, 17, 18 years old.
Oh, Shameless?
Shameless, yes, thank you.
That horrible show.
I know, it's absolutely horrible, but you know, he was talked into it by his supposed girlfriend, which turned out she's not a girlfriend at all, but she was just using him, but he was convinced to get himself cut, and went through all the trouble and all that too. He didn't really go into whether he's happy or not afterwards, but you know, he got.
I think kind of how she moved on to someone that wasn't cut and was supposedly okay with it, and then his facial expression I think it speaks volumes.
Yeah. So I feel real sad about that. There are videos of men that have talked about themselves getting circumcised as adults on YouTube, but pretty much all cases I've seen were guys that had troubles with their they were having medical problems. But at least as an adult, you can choose how much you want removed.
Well,
you draw your own line.
I don't even agree with that, because most U.S. medical doctors don't even give patients the option of, hey, if you use the steroid cream, then you're not going to need to be cut.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there's a lot more adults cut unnecessarily because they're not given the full range of options, because so many U.S. doctors automatically jump to, oh, well, if you're having problems with your penis, then you should be circumcised if you're not already.
Yeah, that makes me ask or wonder whether people should be seeing dermatologists instead of urologists when you're having troubles with your prepuce, because it's skin, right? Right, and if you're having like balanitis or whatever, that's a skin issue, not a urology issue where you're dealing with the urine, the urinary tract. Right. I mean, this comes close, but it's not the urinary tract itself. It's skin, just like any skin anywhere else. So
but
I'm wondering.
My experience with dermatologists.
I know.
I have.
They're not all that perfect
opinions.
either. Dermatologists aren't all that perfect either, but at least they would be more likely, I would think, to suggest creams and stuff instead of amputation.
Yeah.
Whereas urologists, and I've read a urology textbook all the way through, and took screenshots and put it into a letter to the editors. There were 8 editors, and it took a long time to do this, but I put together and said, okay, and this was a 2020 version. It was
what do you mean by 2020?
2020 edition.
Oh, you mean it was an edition
Yes. It was edited by 8 editors and released in 2020.
Wow.
So a new one, and it was very, very biased towards circumcision. They were using the word circumcision, which, first of all, they should just drop that word when it comes to the medical side of it, because it's a preputial amputation, or at the very least call it posthectomy. I mean, we call it appendectomy, or use other terms that are professional terms,
right?
Not something that's born out of a ritual.
Yeah.
Right. So I find it very unprofessional. But anyways, we were talking about intact individuals, and I was covering how urologists are kind of taught to be more biased towards just jumping to.
Yeah, and I found with urologists that, or not just urologists, but any medical professional, when you talk about the penis and the foreskin and stuff, they oftentimes don't use proper anatomy terms. They use euphemisms like head and the balls and things like that. And I'm like, why are you talking like that? Like, that's not the proper terminology.
I think that they're dealing with a kindergartner.
And I mean, I called one out on it at Children's Hospital in Seattle, and she was all taken aback. She's like, well, isn't that what you call them? I'm like, no. Like, just call it a penis. Like,
yeah. Penis, testes. I went to sex ed class.
I mean, she was calling my son's glands the head of his penis. I'm like, no, those are his glands. And she's like, oh, well, and she kind of, backtracked a bit. And I'm like, just use proper terminology, or don't you know it? And she was really upset that I questioned her on that.
Opportunity to grow, person.
Yeah, I ended up filing a complaint with Children's Hospital with her, and she was never, and I said I never want her assigned to my son's case again.
Yeah, so. Well, Douglas Deacon works there, right? Yeah. One of those people that we just love as a dentist.
Wait, does he work at Children's or does he work at UW? Because they're both connected.
Well, yeah, he's involved at UW, but he works at Children's. And when Reed and
I know you
Chris and I protested it,
yeah.
It was a Children's Hospital funded bioethics thing.
Oh, okay.
And Deacon is like one of the main speakers there. So, and we got to see Deacon. He came up and looked at us and didn't say a word. I didn't want to do the same. So. He knew though while we both Reed and I emailed him saying, hey, expect us there. So he wasn't, shocked or anything. So.
And I will say that this was a PA to one of the urologists at Children's Hospital in Seattle that I had a bad experience with, and there were other things that I won't go into that she said that were just stupid. And then after we met with an actual urologist, they apologized profusely, and they were much more professional and supporting that we were not ever going to circumcise our son, and there was no need to, and why this PA suggested such a thing was just ridiculous. So we have had other experiences at Children's Hospital that were amazing, and I don't want to give Seattle Children's a bad name just because of one bad experience. So
I'm torn. Obviously there's good things that go on in the hospital, but this happens to be one bad thing, and there's more that would question it, and then have the discussion. Okay, so the last thing on psychological impact is the advocates for genital autonomy, or the intactivists. And you expressed earlier how hearing it, the bad side of it all the time, and not being able to sleep. For those of us that know that's bad and how bad it is and why it's bad and all that, and then to know that it's happening every day, it's extremely stressful, and it leads to burnout for us intactivists. So we end up just avoiding looking at posts where some of us advocates, we share posts around where we know this, one post or tweet or whatever where this person is, promoting it or supporting it, or, saying they're going to get their child cut or whatever, and seeing that is something we don't want to see sometimes. As much as it might be an opportunity to try to educate someone, we only see it so many times before we're just burnt out from it.
Yeah, and I did this for years from soon after I started getting active on Facebook, so 2008 or 2009 through 2015, I think. When I started taking care of my parents is when I just didn't have the mental capacity or emotional capacity really to continue on with intactivism like I had been, and so it took a back burner. And now that I'm not taking care of my parents anymore, I think I have more of the capacity to do some intactivism, but I don't think nearly in the capacity, gung-ho, let's get this done type of attitude that I had before. I'm more cautious now, and I much prefer the Your Whole Baby tabling events over things like Bloodstained Men protests on street corners and in front of hospitals and things like that.
You want to elaborate more about why?
I think it's just a personal preference. I enjoy the atmosphere of a baby fair because people are there for one reason, to learn more things about babies and toddlerhood and things like that. So they, are already in a mindset for receiving that type of information, whether they are recognize that or not. And two, it's a much more gentle form of education, whereas Bloodstained Men is really in your face. And that's just personally not me. So. Okay.
Well, now you're really encouraging me more to go ahead and get things scheduled for the San Diego. September 11th, San Diego, baby.
I would really like to go to that. So.
Okay, and Euro wants to go.
Oh, good. So. Yeah, as long as I'm not working.
She's going to fly down.
Okay.
That's commitment.
I'm not working, so it depends on what, because I have two other jobs. I am a youth director at a church in Granada Hills, California, and I am a peer support specialist and support group facilitator for DBSA, Depression Bipolar Support Alliance. So I have to schedule things in between those two schedules.
The CEO of the event has been looking for an OB to do a speaking arrangement thing there. I think it was on LinkedIn that she posted it, and she hasn't gotten any. I don't think she's gotten any responses to that yet.
John Geishka?
John is not an OB.
I didn't realize that.
No.
Oh no, OB. I was just thinking doctor in general.
So, yeah. So, anyways, any other thoughts on how this psychologically impacts advocates?
I mean, I've had nightmares. I have had just not being able to sleep all night, and then I don't get rest. And I mean, I have kids and family and jobs I have to do during the day. So that's a big reason why I didn't. It's a big reason why I dropped it and didn't continue on with activism. I got really burned out, and I think definitely when it was time to take care of my parents, I couldn't do one more thing. They both had different forms of dementia, and so it was a lot to focus on that. And
along with kids.
And work and everything else.
Too. Yeah, for sure. And just share my side of that. It's definitely impacted my desire to continue my IT career because even the other kind of work that I do complete in order to earn an income to pay our bills is hard for me because I'm constantly distracted by this topic. I'm constantly coming up with ideas of what else I want to do to try to spread the message. You can easily go out and share things on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, but all that stuff just goes around and around inside of echo chambers, and I'm always looking for ways to get it out of the echo chamber. And sometimes it feels like the only way to do it is through outdoor protesting. The expos are great, and we can even do fairs and pride events and stuff like that, but those only happen so often.
Right, and I prefer that over the protesting itself. I like pride events. I like meeting new people. I like having peaceful conversations with people. I don't appreciate arguing. That's something that just totally turns me off from wanting to have anything to do with not just intactivism, but any type of movement where when you start arguing and you go away from a peaceful conversation, I used to be all like, oh yeah, I'm ready for a fight, but now I'm just like, come on, I don't have the time for this.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
if you're not open to information, if you're closed-minded and you don't have a growth mindset, and I can't help you. You're not going to be open to information. Okay, so relationships is the next major section. The child-parent trust is the first aspect of that, and the way I see it is the moment that you hand your child away to be previously amputated or cut genitally in any way, you're losing trust between you and your child in a certain way. Mm-hmm. Even though they can't talk to you or anything like that. If you imagine being a baby, you're being taken away from your mom, the skin-to-skin contact and all that. And as a doula, I know that's something you've studied and you consider important.
Yeah, but it's important to point out that usually doesn't happen on the first day of life. Like,
I know.
It usually doesn't. I don't think it should happen at all.
I've heard all sorts of variations.
Yeah, I don't think it should happen at all, but it normally is like on the second or third day of life.
Yeah,
but
either way,
still, a baby should not be separated from their parent for anything unless it's a life-saving procedure.
Yeah, maybe they're sleeping, but otherwise they desire connection with their mother. And then the baby starts crying and no one's doing anything about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the baby is maybe put down on a board or whatever, and it's cold or uncomfortable, or it's crying more, nothing's happening. Then they feel pain and they scream, even louder. And again, so that's just breaking down the trust of what's going on in the world. I mean, probably not just trust the parent, but trust of their world. Period is being broken down right away. And then the child gets older and starts realizing what happened to them, and they confront their parent. And the parent doesn't empathize at the very least with their pain. Then, well, there goes trust real fast. Right?
Yeah, and I've heard that some children are laughed at, some are ridiculed, and it's just that should never happen to a child.
No. I mean, even as an adult, it would hurt to have your parent. And I've come across many men that did confront their parents, and their parents did that, and it's like, that was it. That was the end of the relationship. They stopped talking to their parent, period, because of it. And for me, I don't know about you, but for me, the trust between my child and I is, I'm going to hang on to that as long as I possibly can.
Yeah.
I want Jeff and Bryson to feel comfortable telling me whatever is going on with them.
Yeah, and I had a very, I would not say open relationship with my parents. There were certain things that were okay to discuss, and there were certain things that you just did not discuss. Like, sex was one of them. If I mentioned it as a question as a kid, I was met with, embarrassed looks and hushed tones, and we don't talk about that. And so now, as a parent myself and as a doula, I mean, I just think that's unacceptable. You are your child's teacher, and it is your responsibility to teach them about not only their bodies but the world and how their bodies interact with the world around them. So, I don't want our kids to be afraid to come to us about anything.
Another reason why I've been thinking about taking classes on sexology, so I can be a sexologist, and then I can maybe put together a sex ed class that you wouldn't get in high school sex ed class. Why not? I bet a lot of people would flock to that. I mean,
we could do it as a husband and wife.
Oh yeah, there you go. So we were talking about child-parent trust. Oh yeah, we were talking about sex ed class. Yeah, baby. Yeah, that'd be fun.
That has been always something that I have been interested in doing, is teaching sex ed, because it was not taught to me, and I don't think that's okay. I think that every individual has a human right to be taught proper sex ed.
Yeah. But you have to work on your laughing at me explaining how things work and stuff like that sometimes. I know, it's hard to not want to laugh at things sex. Middle schoolers do it all the time. So, yeah. And people make jokes all the time about anything sex. Some of it's kind of a shaming thing, but sometimes it's just a matter of
I don't have problems
discomfort.
talking about sex in general, but when you make it personal, that's when I'm like, no.
Well, there were other things I was talking about, but anyway. So, yeah, I get that it's an uncomfortable topic, and that's just the way it is. But it's something that develops over time as you get more comfortable talking about this stuff. I watched Caitlin V and Dr. Doe, and they talk about this stuff very seriously, and they don't joke about it.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay, so then there's the co-parenting relationship side of it. Now, you and I didn't get into this because you gave me the information, and I was okay either way. I didn't think of it from an egotistical, thank you, position. Like, okay, well, I'm cut, so what's wrong with me, right? I was fine with our sons being left intact.
I think I would have been surprised if you would have put your hands up and said no, like we're doing it. I think I would have been really surprised because to me the information was just so obvious that this is not something you want to do to your child, and so it really has surprised me with other people's reactions that are not like mine. And that's something that has been really hard for me to understand, because when you read all the facts of just forget about ethically, but just reading the procedure itself just completely turned me off, and I just didn't understand how anyone could hand over their child to have that done when there's no medical reason for it. Now, obviously, if a child is born with a heart defect and the only way to continue with life is to have surgery, then that makes sense.
That's a medical indication. You're responding to a medical indication.
But with circumcision, it's completely cosmetic, especially when it's done routinely for an infant.
Yeah.
It just does not make any sense.
Yeah. So I actually did one video where I kind of like did the math of circumcision. And so you have two things, and you got a greater than or equal sign in between, right? So you have the value of the body part that's being removed, and you have the values of removing it, right? So one of the values of removing it might be religious or tribal or whatever. And the values of the part, well, that varies, it seems, from person to person. Like, I thought that it was value of 0, because I thought it was just a vestigial body part or whatever. It's like clipping your fingernails or clipping your hair, and a lot of people often compare it.
Your wisdom teeth, which now there are things that show that it isn't.
Yeah. Exactly. Those might have some value. Maybe not, as high as other body parts, but if you give it a 1 to 10 scale of value, then you have your value of the part right here, and you have the value of removing over here. And to a lot of people, the value of the part is like 0, and the value of removing it is like a 10. So we had to change both sides of that equation for them, and you have to like on the value of removing it, you have to attack multiple things. Not just, you have to attack the religion, you have to attack the medical benefits that are purported, and other things. And over here, you have to explain to them, well, it's not like fingernails, it's not like hair, it's innervated. And as you teach them these things, that number pops up, and this number over here goes down, 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 down.
Yeah.
So we were talking about co-parenting. So we've seen plenty of cases where husbands and wives, or boyfriends and girlfriends, get into it. One doesn't want it done, the other one does, and it goes on both sides. Sometimes the male doesn't want it done, and the female does, and sometimes sometimes flip sides. So the point of bringing that up, though, is that it's affecting relationships. And if we didn't have ritual genital cutting going on in the world, that would be one less thing to break up relationships. I mean, sometimes this leads to divorce.
Yeah.
And then you got the mother-child bond, and I brought this up a little bit with the child-parent trust thing.
Yeah, but I mean, let's go back to that, because if one is going to, after they are presented with all the facts, if one is going to still say, I'm adamant on circumcising, and the other one isn't, what does that say about other things that they are willing or not willing to do? So to me, it just, if you were to completely take away the circumcision debate and just assume that everyone stays intact, I don't know if those relationships would end up staying together down the road.
Yeah, anyways, yeah, you're right. I mean, everyone has their patterns, and you can typically identify a person's pattern by just one thing that they do. Because they do that one thing, then in other areas of their life, they're probably going to follow a certain pattern of behavior. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. It could lead to I guess maybe the relationship wasn't meant to be in the first place if the disagreement is strong and the other partner is open to growing or whatever. So mother-child bond. and I brought this up again with the child parent trust thing. Is, you've got skin contact, stuff like that. And, so I've seen this multiple times in nature, where if a child, as a baby, is manipulated or
then the mother doesn't want anything to do with it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think the same thing happens in humanity. I think that the mother, even though she might stick around, becomes more and more disconnected from their own son or child, and when there's outside forces controlling the child.
Do you think that would contribute to controversial things such as the mother being willing to use the cry it out method and things like that? That would be something interesting to ask a pediatrician.
Mm-hmm.
Or not just a pediatrician, but a psychiatrist or psychologist.
Yeah. And I kind of wonder, and this can be in the FGM realm too.
Because it doesn't just affect emotional attachment, and it affects physical attachment too. Because if a child is in excruciating pain and the mother was going to breastfeed, that child is not going to latch. Therefore, they are not going to breastfeed, so it hinders the breastfeeding relationship, and then it starts to break down more the physical bond that the mother has with the baby, not just the emotional and...
Yeah, and babies fail to breastfeed for multiple reasons. Even if the child is well anesthetized or whatever down there, and they don't necessarily feel pain during the procedure, they've lost blood, and there's a harm done to them. So, like Brother Kay has shared his story about how he went for like 2 days without eating, and I can only imagine how that affects the mother when you're supposed to be producing, and you need to breastfeed in order to keep that process going. And if you're not, then what happens there?
Yeah, and it's even if there is proper pain management during the procedure, I have never heard of proper pain management after the procedure. Tylenol is the standard thing, and that does not cut an amputation. I'm sorry, but I mean, no pun intended. That does not adequately cover pain management for having something cut off of your body that isn't supposed to be cut off, like not fingernails, not hair, but
a human body waste.
Yeah.
What hair and fingernails are, but and you're even involved with like the Leche League and stuff like that.
Not completely. I mean, I know about them, but I haven't actually been in one of their groups. I should have been. It would have helped.
Yeah. Anyway, there's plenty of articles about how breastfeeding is impacted by this procedure. So, yeah, I mean, you could delay it until the child isn't breastfeeding anymore, but just don't do it at all.
That would be ideally 2 years.
Yeah. And I've seen, even like 5-year-olds breastfeeding. Right? So,
yeah.
I guess it depends on how crunchy of a mother you are. Any other thoughts on the mother-child bond? Okay. Pedophilia. This one is disturbing.
Why are you getting this?
So, there's a lot of, like, I've heard of stories where nurses talk about how the butcher, doctor, surgeon, whoever, gets a
hard on.
During the procedure, which really is disturbing. But I actually have a theory about how this might be impacting the continuation of pedophilia. Right. So I often hear that guys want tight holes.
Vaginas. Can you stop calling it a hole?
Oh, it could be anus, right?
Okay, fine.
But still tight. And the idea is that younger women have tighter vaginas. I've also seen like movies where where a woman will talk about doing their Kegels for their partner and stuff like that, right? Because if the guy doesn't have all that sensitive tissue and the sensitive glands and stuff like that, then what he's left with is pressure.
Right.
And I'll attest that, pressure does feel good to me. And I've even heard that there's definitely a trend upward of women getting labiaplasty and reconstructive surgery or whatever to make things tighter down there for their partner. So,
does that actually...
I don't know. That's what I've heard.
I mean...
And
it doesn't sound like it would be super successful to have plastic surgery there.
It's
is
done.
Plastic surgery ever super successful? I mean, look at some of the Hollywood stars who've had face lifts. It just doesn't look good.
Doesn't make sense to me either. I wouldn't do it for myself. I'll name one name here because I know she hates me, but Jessica Penn got herself cut. I don't know, Penn, I don't know. You can look her up on Medium. She has a blog where she talks about her story. When she turned 18, she got labiaplasty.
Sorry, excuse me.
And the butcher cut way more off than she asked for. And she later, she was only 18, so she didn't know a whole lot, but she later learned that medical textbooks don't have any information taught to OBs and surgeons, stuff like that, about the innervation of the clitoris.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been her life mission to get medical education updated and improved in that area. So why she did it?
I think a lot of it comes down to how you're brought up and how open your parents are to body autonomy and things like that. Like if you grow up in a household where your parents are affirming of, there's a wide range of normal, and that, just because you look different from your classmates, it doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. I mean, it's not just your genitals, it's everything. Like, for an example, I know someone who insisted her granddaughter should have her ears pinned back because her ear stuck out too much, and I was just dumbfounded that a grandmother would say that about their grandchild.
Body shaming, yeah. And the body shaming is what leads to some of these genital surgeries, whether it's done as a child or whether it's done when you're old enough to choose it for yourself. But anyways,
and I have to say that person, that child, is now an adult, and her ears do not stick out, and they are perfectly fine. And she did not have surgery. So there's a wide range of normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And our differences is what makes us unique and makes life interesting and fun. Yeah. So anyways, that's just my theory on this whole thing affecting pedophilia. So a lot of people say that it's just pedophilic that this ritual genital cutting of children goes on at all. That itself is a pedophilic thing that causes us to do it. And then there's the doctor-patient relationships. Yeah. Personally, I just can't. I would not be able to handle having a physician care for me that thought that this was a good idea. Cutting children's genitals without a...
Yeah, because if they're okay with ethically doing that, what else are they okay with ethically doing?
Exactly. So, and I think that we've had some run-ins with our own pediatricians and stuff like that around this whole issue.
Yeah, and I just want to stress how wonderful naturopaths are, and how, of course, not all naturopaths, not all midwives are against routine infant circumcision, but at least more of them are against it than MDs are. And so I really value naturopaths and midwives who are who have been our sons, pediatricians, and my doctor's primary doctor, and really appreciate the work that they're doing.
And the last relationship is around friends and family, and you already addressed that earlier, how we've lost connection with friends and family when we brought this issue up with them. To get defensive or whatever, we try to share.
And not just extended family, but immediate family.
Yeah.
And how
Yeah.
it just seems crazy to me.
No. Yeah, like your father was intact and he was happily intact in his entire life, so why can't other boys grow up like that?
Yeah, and that's another thing that I guess that just highlights how private my parents were, that when we were expecting our first, we didn't find out if we were having a boy or girl, but I thought my dad would have spoken up and said something against circumcision, and he never did.
Yeah, it's a good point. I've often asked, why aren't more intact men, laying these myths to shame? They should be slamming on them and saying, this is bull. It's not more hygienic, it's not this.
After I had become an intactivist, I asked my dad, because he was born in 1931 at home, so I knew there was a good chance that he was intact. And so I asked him point blank, were you circumcised? And he was just aghast that I asked him such a thing. He's like, well, of course not. Why would I be? And so it just, and I asked him, well, then why didn't you say something before Jackson was born? And he didn't have an answer for me.
Yeah. So thank you to the intact male intactivists out there. Really appreciate it. It means a lot. Because it's, hearing it from the horse's mouth, per se. That's a powerful thing. If intact men are saying, hey, these myths are exactly that. They're just myths. UTIs, STDs, all this other stuff. STIs, exactly. So, and what I think it is too is they don't realize, they don't even know what the procedure is. They don't understand what's being removed from boys, and they don't take the time to realize how valuable that part is to themselves.
Yeah, I know that people in Europe, when they discover what is done in America, they're just horrified. Yeah. And I don't understand why Americans don't have the same reaction.
No. It's just been so normalized. It's too long. It's really hard to get through. Okay, so that's all the relationships. Then there's the FGM and intersex normalization surgeries that go on in the world, and how this all tie together.
Why would you call FGM normalization surgeries?
No. FGM and intersex normalization.
Okay, I didn't hear the and.
Yeah.
I just got
Sorry.
it. Okay.
Yeah. So there's female circumcision, and if you look at the history and everything like that, and you look at where it exists, there's nowhere in the world where there's just female circumcision and not male circumcision. It's male circumcision always exists, and it's as if it existed first. And it seems like Islam has had an impact on this as well.
Mm-hmm.
But also, from what I've read, this stuff has existed long before it was brought up from Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
these things
seem
fine. Egyptians were doing that before Abraham.
Well, if you read Rosemary's book, she's done an extensive amount of research on this. Mm-hmm. It's really amazing. But her book is really hard to read through because it just makes you sick that it's going on. But she spent many years researching this topic, and she has references to all sorts of things where she gets what she found out in her book. And hopefully we'll get a newer edition put out soon. But you can, I think I've got it up there, and you can also read it in mine. But, But yeah, it's interesting how this all, how all this genital cutting has been going on for so many thousands of years, and it's, as far as we can tell, it's all just ritualistic. It's all superstitious, religious stuff that's caught us.
I would caution you on throwing superstitious and religion together. That just.
I know you and I differ on this because you have your faith. I understand, but a lot of people see it as just that.
I know people who are not religious see it as the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. So the point, the reason why I'm bringing it up is that it's intertwined, and a lot of people think that you're not going to be able to get rid of female circumcision without also getting rid of male circumcision, because it's like the female thing was there because of male, and it's like whether you're looking at it from a male perspective or a female perspective, it's like include the females. Like, hey, the males are getting their genital cuts for whatever reason. Well, why aren't the females getting their genitals cut too? Like, whether they want to, whether they want females to be closer to God too, or maybe it's the whole, sexual control thing. Who knows?
Well, I mean, you have to look at those cultures, and most of those cultures where FGM is prominent, women are viewed as property. So you have to take that into consideration as well.
Yeah, and not all cases, but yeah.
And that's another point with American circumcision, is that a lot of parents who choose to have their son circumcised view their children as property and not as their own entity.
Have you seen the weed that Jackson put together?
Yeah.
He drew it, and I wrote, and we wrote down the words. So it all comes down to control, economics on both sides, right? Really, control is the biggest root. Right, and these others are just kind of effects of control. But so like in the United States, and elsewhere where male circumcision is going on, there's a financial aspect to it. The moils or whoever, the butchers, the doctors, surgeons, they're making money from doing the procedure. And there's also the effects on pharmaceuticals like Viagra, sold more for another cut. There's more sales of KY jelly and. I can go on and on. But on the female side, where it's happening, it's, like you're saying, they're property. They actually sell their daughters. And they can't sell their daughters if the daughters aren't fixed.
Yeah.
So, and they get their chickens and cows and goats and whatever in trade when they do this. So it's really hard to break that cultural habit. You got to replace it with something else, and that's the challenge that I see they're having. And the founder of Orchid Project did a TEDx presentation, and everything that she said about how they're trying to approach this and deal with it and everything like that applies to male circumcision as well. Across the board, it's all the same stuff. You see it. Even when it comes to intersex stuff, a lot of it is cosmetic. It's about the looks. They want to make sure their child will be able to have a partner when they become adults. People say the same thing about, I want my son to be able to get a blowjob when they get older. So same roots, and you don't pull up a root by just pulling off one weed or one leaf. You have to dig the whole root up. Weed up. And then there's the social productivity side of this.
You touched on intersex.
Like I said earlier, with intersex there's also cosmetic.
Yeah, right. But I mean, you have to remember that there's a wide range of normal. So just because someone doesn't look perfectly male or perfectly female doesn't mean that they aren't a normal person between their legs. Yeah. I mean,
it definitely doesn't mean that they will want to have that part missing when, if they have a large clitoris, for example, they might wish that they would have been left with that large clitoris when they go.
Yeah, it really comes down to body autonomy. It is that person's body, so don't make body alterations that person can't make for themselves until they're old enough to consent for themselves.
There's no reason to not wait with most of this stuff.
Same with piercings and with tattoos and even haircuts. So
yeah, well, it's like I don't love long hair, but I'm not letting Jackson have his hair. You know, to me that would be forcing him to have a haircut would be violating his body autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
So you know,
and that's one thing that I wish we wouldn't have done when the boys were, you know, toddlers, is cut their hair. I wish we would have waited. But I mean, now, I mean, their hair was getting in their food, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There comes a line where it's like you have to care for them, right? You have to take care of them. So that's.
I know, we could have put their hair back in ties
if
they would have kept it in ties. But
that's the thing is, they weren't old enough to care for their own hair, and we were having to do it.
I know. It was just so pretty.
Yeah, and when it comes to piercings, it's to me that's just controlling how your child looks. But,
yeah, I have a really big problem with little girls getting their ears pierced before they can ask for it themselves. It just, you don't have a doll, you have a child.
Yeah, so. And I think that's a traumatic event that can create PTSD or whatever if they're not choosing it for themselves. I mean, I'm not saying that you wait until they're 18.
Right. I mean, I wanted my ears pierced from as far back as I can remember, and I would beg my mom to please let me get my ears pierced, and she wouldn't let me get my ears pierced when I was 14. And the only reason she let me do that is because she thought that I would be able to take the pain by then. And she didn't understand me well at all, because I've always had a high pain threshold, and so to get my ears pierced at 14 was nothing. Like, I mean, pain-wise, it was just like a pinch, and that was it. So. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
even if it would have been painful, you chose it at least, right? And that creates a totally different dynamic when it comes to being traumatized.
Yeah. So I mean, like with our boys, I've let them know, if you want your ears pierced, just ask. If you want your nose pierced, just ask. And no, we don't want that done. But I mean, I want to make sure that they know if they want to make body modifications, that's fine, as long as it's themselves choosing to do so.
Yeah, not social pressures or something like that.
Now tattoos are a little bit more permanent, so I have told them, wait until you're 18, and then if you want one, I'll take you to go get one. But they so far have no interest in getting anything like that.
The only worry I have with tattoos at their age is they're still growing, so tattoo might get stressed the wrong way and might not be happy with it later on. So.
Yeah. Which is why you typically do not tattoo children.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know some societies do, but I do not agree with that. And that's a whole other thing. But it all comes back to body autonomy.
Yeah. So, on the FGM and the intersex side of things, do you have any other points to add?
No, just that, normal is a wide range, and I personally do not believe there should be only 2 boxes for male and female. I think there should be something else.
Yeah, I was just listening to
several other somethings.
Something. Actually, I listened to something this morning. It was a radio broadcast or podcast thing, and the guy was kind of picking on antacists a little bit, but he's cut, and so he's a little bit biased on the topic. But the point was, where was I going with this? What was that you just said?
Intersex, more than male and female.
Oh, he said, well, his response to the whole intersex thing is, when people say, well, there's only male and female, it's like, so how many combinations of XX and XY and X and XXX and all these, how many combinations are there? Like, oh, okay. So it's like, you can't, it's not just X and XY, there's all these other combinations, so how do you fit them into male or female? And when you look at the spectrum between, having a large clitoris or a micro penis, well, where do you draw the line on that?
Right.
So I think of sex as a spectrum.
Yeah.
Okay, so social productivity is the next thing, and the reason why I brought this up is I see that there's all these people, you can call them oil surgeons, butchers, I work for them. They're spending all this time cutting children's genitalia. What if all those people are doing something different? What if they were working on fixing cancer, or fixing COVID, or all sorts of other things, or building more houses, so
doing something productive,
yeah, exactly,
to benefit society instead of harm society.
Exactly. And then there's also us advocates that are spending so many hours every day trying to convince people to not do it. And I'd much rather be doing other things. Much rather. but my
Excuse me.
my conscience drives me to keep doing this in any way, shape, or form I possibly can stomach.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the very last thing, forced retraction.
Mm.
Yeah. So again, the inner mucosa is adhered to the glands at birth and for so many years afterwards, and it varies widely as to how fast that separates. Only the individual should be pulling that back if they want to pull it back at all. You don't go in opening up the labia or anything like that on a girl. Give her a bath, wipe properly and clean properly, but you don't need to go digging inside anything. You don't need to go digging in. You don't need to be pulling this back to clean it. It's adhered, so it keeps stuff out on its own, and it's not just adhered, but it's also a one-way sphincter. So just wipe like a finger, base to tip.
Excuse me.
Which leads me to, I'm thinking of creating a petition to get the AAP to add details to their instructions. I actually have instructions on how to change diapers. They do not go into any detail about exactly how to wipe the genitalia of a girl versus a boy.
Really?
Yeah, none. Pisses me off. But I was led to this because I started calling around to the daycares in the area about, to just make sure they know not to forcefully retract. Luckily, most of them know. But they led me to an organization in the county that teaches daycare workers. So I called them, and they're like, "Oh, we just use the AAP thing." So I looked up the AAP thing, and really, they don't have any detail about how to deal with wiping the genitalia. So and there was one daycare that I called that did things that they needed to forcefully retract. And what led me to even all this was that there was a tweet by a woman that said that she would definitely get her son's
I remember that.
Yeah. Because
she was a daycare
worker,
yeah.
And she forcefully retracted every time. And she said that the baby screamed his head off.
Well, you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So she definitely got an education. I think she ended up deleting that tweet, but
yeah,
that really, because to me, I don't know what's worse. If you get forcefully retracted over and over and over again, and you keep building up scar tissue in there. Is that worse than not having your prepuce at all in the first place?
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I don't know.
And that's something I don't even remember when we had Jackson and Bryson, is if we were told to wipe like a finger and if intact, don't retract. I don't even remember being taught that. I just remember, you just wipe it, and that's, I don't remember ever thinking anything about retraction. Like, that never entered my mind.
Yeah, I don't remember when I ran into the education about that either, but it wasn't. I did wonder if things needed to be cleaned in there a little bit, but after as I learned more and more, it's like, leave it alone. It's very easy. Give them a regular bath and stuff like that.
And honestly, having babysat girls versus having our own two boys, to me, it's much more difficult to change a girl's diaper than it is to change a boy's diaper.
And I've changed boys' diapers that were both preputially amputated and of course our own, and it's clearly, definitely easier to clean an intact boy. I think it's so much easier, because everything's there. It's supposed to be there to protect itself.
Yeah.
So I have a note here is people not knowing intact care. Why is that happening? Why do people have this supposed need to see the head of the penis?
The glands.
Yeah, the glands. I hate that term head because it's not this head. The penis doesn't have a head. It's like people have given it that term. It's the glands. So.
I don't know what the fascination is. I didn't have any. It never occurred to me to pull their foreskin back when they were babies. that's what you see. That's all you see. Like, it didn't occur to me to do anything else.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the draw or fascination is to pull back the foreskin.
People get too used to it. I guess they get too used to the same one way. Especially, I mean, imagine if you would have been a daycare worker dealing with boys for so much time before you had
I babysat cut boys, and I thought one of them was being abused, and I didn't know who to tell because it was all purple.
Yeah.
And I was horrified when I first changed his diaper, and I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And I mentioned it, I forget who I mentioned it to, but it was a trusted adult because I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, that's just how boys are. I'm like, that's not how other boys have been that I've changed their diapers.
Oh, so you've changed intact?
No, they were cut, but they weren't purple. And
yeah, I think it depends on how soon after the surgery.
So I was just horrified that was considered normal. But I didn't know still that was a result from circumcision. I never, I had no idea what caused that, or I just knew that did not look normal to me.
So even though you dealt with previously amputated boys, changing diapers multiple times, you still weren't motivated to pull back.
No, because I knew that's the natural state of what it looked like, and
there's no reason to clean underneath it.
Yeah.
You weren't worried about stuff getting down inside there.
It never occurred to me because, well, I guess part of it was because I knew it was a sphincter. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you don't reach inside the anus and clean up inside. Yeah. So.
Yeah, or the vagina. Yeah. So it's. Yeah, when you think of it as that, it's like there's no reason to go clean it inside because it's already cleaning itself. Inside. I mean,
there must have been something in the pamphlet stuff that Michelle Antoinette gave to us that had proper intact care, but I don't remember it. Like, I remember reading the article on what happens during a circumcision.
Okay. Interesting. All right. After all these interviews, I don't know that I have a real good answer on that actual question about why it's. It just, to me, I guess it's so normalized, and so many medical professionals have been taught wrong that it needs to be pulled back.
It just, and it never occurred to me to tell caregivers that babysat our kids not to pull the foreskin back. So I don't know if they were ever retracted, but they've never complained about it. They never had any redness or anything like that. So I assume that they weren't retracted.
Well, we mostly take care of them when they were babies.
I mean, we would leave for date nights and stuff like that. Remember the babysitting co-op?
Vaguely.
That's how we met Aaron and Amanda and Cole and Kat were in it. And
yes, they
Julie
were. Bryson was at my infant.
Yeah. You
Hmm.
forgot all about that?
Kind of, well, vaguely. I never really thought to process it, I guess. So,
yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, and I know your mom changed some diapers.
You're scaring me.
Well, I mean, I'm sure they're fine. They're teenagers and they haven't complained of anything, so.
Yeah.
And they never had any redness.
Yeah. It might be, I mean, maybe they were forcefully retracted once or twice, and that wasn't enough to cause a buildup of problems.
Yeah. But no, it's something I have thought about that, like, why didn't we tell people not to retract? Like, it didn't occur to me.
Yeah. Well,
because I didn't think to retract, so why would I think to tell anyone else not to retract?
Yeah.
Now I gave you something else to worry about.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, it's, I feel like I'm fighting two fights here now. I'm not just fighting, for body autonomy, for genital autonomy. I'm also fighting for educating people to know the right
Proper care.
care.
Yeah.
And I don't have $1 million to throw at advertising education.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, our medical professionals and our medical education institutions aren't doing it. I mean, we look at some of the medical textbooks out there, and they don't. They talk about what the preputial. Oh, that's the part that's typically cut off by circumcision. It's all this. They don't tell you about how it's edgier. They don't tell you about the different parts of it. They don't tell you that it's a mucosal structure or any of that. So, I guess all we can do is keep on spreading the information and keep hoping that someone will be able to get this improved. Well, thank you, Ann, for doing this interview with me.
You're welcome.
Still a little worried, but also very excited about it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay. Well, I'm going to stop the recording then.
Okay.
All right. Bye.